My android said humans are illogical. Then she watched me choose my brother over the mission. Welcome back, everyone. If you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a like on this video. It really helps bring you more stories like this one. And hey, tell me in the comments which state or country you're watching from. I love seeing our community grow across the world. Now, let's get into today's story. The colony ship Meridian had been drifting for 6 days when Captain James Chen finally admitted the truth. They weren't going to make it. He stood on the bridge, staring at the damage reports flickering across the holographic display. The numbers painted a grim picture that even the most optimistic reading couldn't hide. Every system was failing. Every hour brought them closer to a cold, silent death in the void between stars. James had been a captain for 12 years. He had navigated asteroid fields, survived pirate attacks, weathered solar storms that would have torn lesser ships apart. But nothing had prepared him for this. Nothing had prepared him for the slow, inevitable crawl toward extinction, while 2,000 innocent people slept in cryogenic chambers below, dreaming of a new world they might never see. Hull breach in Sector 7. Life support failing in Sectors 12 through 15. Navigation systems offline. And worst of all, the quantum drive, the only thing that could get them to the nearest station, was damaged beyond repair. 2,000 colonists in cryosleep, 43 crew members awake and working around the clock, and one android who kept reminding him that the math didn't work. Captain Chen, the voice came from behind him, precise and measured. As always, I have completed my analysis. James turned to face Arya. She stood in the doorway, her synthetic form designed to appear human, but never quite achieving it. Her skin was too smooth, too perfect. Her eyes were a pale silver that caught the light in ways human eyes never did. Her movements were fluid but calculated, every gesture optimized for efficiency. Arya, autonomous reasoning and intelligence assistant, the most advanced android ever created, assigned to the Meridian as a scientific advisor and emergency response coordinator. In the 6 months since they'd left Earth, James had learned to respect her capabilities. Her processing power was unmatched. Her knowledge base was essentially infinite. Her ability to analyze situations and provide optimal solutions had saved the ship twice already. But he'd also learned something else about her. She didn't understand humans at all. Go ahead, James said. Arya stepped forward, her silver eyes fixed on the damaged display. Based on current resource consumption rates and system degradation, the Meridian will become completely non-functional in approximately 72 hours. Life support will fail in 61 hours. All personnel, including colonists in cryosleep, will expire within 63 hours. James felt his jaw tighten. I'm aware of the timeline. Then you are also aware that there is only one logical course of action. James waited. Arya continued without emotion. The quantum drive can be repaired. However, the required component is located in the outer hull section that was damaged during the asteroid impact. Accessing this section requires a crew member to perform an extravehicular repair in an area exposed to lethal radiation. She paused. The radiation level in that section guarantees death within 4 hours of exposure. The repair will take approximately 3 hours. Therefore, the crew member who performs this repair will not survive. James closed his eyes. He already knew this. He'd known it for 2 days. He'd been avoiding the conversation because he knew what came next. The logical choice, Arya continued, is to select the crew member whose loss would have the least impact on ship operations and colony establishment. Based on my analysis, the optimal candidate is Lieutenant Daniel Chen. James felt something cold settle in his stomach. Daniel Chen, his younger brother. Arya, James said slowly. Do you know who Daniel Chen is? Yes, he is the ship's secondary communications officer. His skill set is redundant with primary communications officer Martinez. His loss would reduce operational capacity by only 4.7%. Additionally, he volunteered for the mission specifically because you, his brother, were assigned as captain. His psychological profile indicates he would likely volunteer for this mission if asked. She tilted her head slightly. Shall I summon him to the bridge? James stared at her. For a long moment he couldn't speak. Then he said quietly, No. Arya processed this response. Captain, I do not understand. The logic is clear. Lieutenant Chen is the optimal choice. Summoning him now would allow us to begin repairs within the hour and ensure the survival of 2,000 colonists plus 42 remaining crew members. James turned back to the damaged display. I said no. Arya, this is illogical, Captain. You are allowing emotional attachment to compromise mission success. Daniel Chen is your brother, but he is also one crew member among 43. The mathematical calculation is simple. One life versus 2,042 lives. James's hands gripped the console in front of him. I'm aware of the math. Then why do you refuse to act on it? Because he's my brother. Arya paused. I understand the biological relationship. However, I do not understand why this relationship supersedes logical decision-making. Your brother's genetic material is already preserved in the colony database. His memories and personality could theoretically be reconstructed. The concept of brotherhood is a social construct that should not override mathematical reality. James turned to face her again. Arya, have you ever loved anyone? The android's silver eyes flickered. Love is a biochemical response triggered by evolutionary imperatives for pair bonding and offspring protection. I am not capable of biochemical responses. Therefore, I cannot experience love. Then you can't understand why I won't send my brother to die. Arya considered this. You are correct. I cannot understand. Human emotional attachment appears to be a significant impediment to rational decision-making. In my 3 years of operation, I have observed humans make numerous choices that defy logical analysis. They sacrifice themselves for strangers. They risk their lives for animals. They choose death over betraying people they care about. She stepped closer. These choices are illogical. They reduce overall survival probability. They waste resources. They create unnecessary suffering. And yet, humans continue to make them. I have concluded that humans are fundamentally illogical beings. James almost laughed. Maybe we are. This is not amusing, Captain. Your illogical attachment to your brother will result in the deaths of 2,043 people, including yourself, your brother, and me. James shook his head. I didn't say I was giving up. I said I wouldn't send Daniel. Arya processed this. Then who will perform the repair? James looked at her steadily. I will. The android's eyes flickered rapidly. This is even more illogical. You are the captain. Your loss would reduce operational capacity by 31%. Your leadership skills are essential for colony establishment. Your death would significantly decrease mission success probability even if the ship survives. I'm aware. Then why would you choose this course of action? Because, James said quietly, my brother has his whole life ahead of him. He's 26 years old. He joined this mission because he believed in it. He believed in me, and I'm not going to reward that belief by sending him to die so I can live. Arya stood motionless for several seconds. I do not understand, she finally said. You are choosing to sacrifice yourself for one person while condemning 2,000 others to death. How is this different from choosing to save your brother by letting him perform the repair? James paused. He hadn't thought of it that way. The math is the same, Arya continued. Either your brother dies and everyone else lives, or you die and everyone else dies. There is no scenario in which your sacrifice saves anyone. You are not being noble. You are being selfish. James felt her words hit him like a physical blow. She was right. If he performed the repair instead of Daniel, he would die. And then who would lead the ship? Who would coordinate the landing? Who would make the 1,000 decisions that needed to be made in the next few months? He wasn't saving Daniel by dying himself. He was just making himself feel better while dooming everyone. Arya watched his face. You are experiencing cognitive dissonance, she observed. You have realized that your proposed action is illogical, but you still do not want to accept the logical alternative. This is fascinating. James almost laughed again, but there was no humor in it. Fascinating. That's one word for it. Captain, Arya said. May I ask a question? Go ahead. Why do you value your brother's life more than your own? James thought about it. He remembered growing up in the housing blocks of New Shanghai. 2 boys in a 2-room apartment with a mother who worked 3 jobs, and a father who had died in the Mars mining collapse when Daniel was only 4 years old. James had been 14 then, old enough to understand what death meant, old enough to see how it broke their mother, old enough to know that someone needed to step up and hold what remained of their family together. He remembered teaching Daniel to read because their mother was never home, sitting with him for hours, sounding out words, celebrating every small victory like it was a championship win. He remembered walking Daniel to school every day, holding his hand, promising that things would get better even when he wasn't sure he believed it himself. He remembered the nights when Daniel had nightmares about their father. James would climb into his bed and hold him until the shaking stopped, telling stories about distant planets and brave explorers, until Daniel finally fell asleep. He remembered the day Daniel got accepted to the academy, the look on his face, half disbelief and half pure joy. the tears in his eyes when he said, "I'm going to make you proud, James. I'm going to be just like you." James had cried too that day, not because he was sad, but because he had spent 10 years pouring everything he had into his little brother, and it had worked. Daniel was going to be something. Daniel was going to live the life their father never got to live. He remembered the day Daniel had told him he was joining the Meridian mission. James had tried to talk him out of it. The journey was dangerous. The colony might fail. There were 1,000 things that could go wrong. But Daniel had just smiled and said, "I want to be there when you build something new. I want to help. I want to stand beside you when we look up at an alien sky and know we did it together. Why do I value his life more than my own?" James repeated. He looked at Arya. "Because I raised him. Because I promised our mother I would take care of him. Because every good thing in his life I helped make happen. And because if he dies because of a decision I made, I won't be able to live with myself anyway." Arya processed this. "So your unwillingness to sacrifice your brother is not purely emotional. It is also based on a prediction that your psychological state would be compromised to the point of dysfunction if he died." James nodded slowly. "Yeah, I guess you could put it that way. This adds a new variable to my calculations." Arya's eyes flickered. "If Daniel Chen performs the repair and survives for approximately 4 hours before radiation exposure proves fatal, you will be psychologically compromised. Based on human psychological profiles, this could reduce your effectiveness by 40 to 60% for an extended period. However, if you perform the repair, the ship loses its captain immediately, resulting in a 100% reduction in your contribution." She paused. "Neither option is optimal." James smiled grimly. "Welcome to being human, Arya. Sometimes there are no good choices." Before we continue, just a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button and leave a like if you're enjoying the story. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. Arya stood silently for almost a full minute. For an android, this was an eternity. Her processing power could analyze millions of scenarios in seconds. The fact that she was taking this long meant something unusual was happening in her neural networks. Finally, she spoke. "Captain, I believe I have identified a third option." James looked at her. "What option?" Arya stepped toward the damage display and manipulated the holographic interface. "The repair requires approximately 3 hours of work in a high-radiation environment. This timeline assumes human physical limitations, including the need for rest, the reduction in fine motor control due to radiation sickness, and the psychological effects of knowing one is dying." She turned to face him. "I am not human." James felt his breath catch. Arya continued, "I do not require rest. My motor control is not affected by radiation. I have no psychological fear of death because I do not experience fear. Additionally, my chassis is partially radiation resistant. I would not begin to experience system degradation for approximately 5 hours. This gives me a 2-hour margin beyond the estimated repair time." James stared at her. "You're saying you could do the repair?" "Yes. And survive?" Arya paused. "No. The radiation level would ultimately destroy my neural network and primary systems. I estimate complete system failure within 6 hours of exposure. The repair itself would be successful, but I would not return." James shook his head. "Arya, I can't ask you to do that. You're not asking. I am offering. But you'd die." Arya tilted her head. "I am not alive, Captain. I am a machine. I do not experience death in the way humans do. I will simply cease to function." James felt something strange happening in his chest. He had spent 6 months thinking of Arya as a tool, a very sophisticated tool, but still just a machine. She analyzed data. She provided recommendations. She didn't have feelings or desires or fears. But now, standing here, watching her offer to sacrifice herself for a crew she had called illogical, he wasn't so sure. "Why?" he asked. "Why would you do this?" Arya's silver eyes met his. "I have been analyzing this situation for the past 4.7 minutes. During that time, I have run over 30 million simulations of possible outcomes. In every simulation where I do not perform the repair, people die. In every simulation where I do perform the repair, people live. The logical choice is clear." James shook his head. "That's not what I asked. I asked why you would choose to sacrifice yourself. You could just let this play out. You could survive when the rest of us don't." Arya considered this. "You are asking about my motivation beyond pure logic." "Yes." The android was silent for a long moment. Then she said something that James would never forget. "I have observed humans for 3 years. I have watched them make choices that defy mathematical analysis. I have seen them sacrifice themselves for strangers, risk everything for people they love, choose death over betrayal. I called these choices illogical, but I have also observed the results of these choices. I have seen communities form around shared sacrifice. I have seen trust built through acts of selflessness. I have seen humans accomplish things that no logical analysis would have predicted possible, simply because they believed in each other. She paused. I do not understand love. I do not understand brotherhood. I do not understand why you would rather die than send your brother to his death. But I have observed that these illogical impulses create something valuable. They create bonds that make humans stronger than they would be alone. They create meaning in a universe that has no inherent meaning. She looked at him directly. I am a machine. I process data and provide optimal solutions. But in 3 years of observation, I have begun to suspect that optimal is not always best. Perhaps the best choice is not the one that maximizes survival probability. Perhaps the best choice is the one that maximizes meaning. James felt tears forming in his eyes. Arya, he whispered, you love your brother. Arya continued, this love is not logical, but it is real. It has shaped your decisions, your character, your entire life. If I allow your brother to die when I could prevent it, I would be destroying something valuable, something that cannot be quantified. She straightened. I choose to preserve that value, even at the cost of my own existence. This is, perhaps, my first illogical choice. James couldn't speak. He had spent 6 months thinking of Arya as a machine, a sophisticated calculator with a humanoid body. But standing here, watching her choose to die for people she barely understood, he realized something. She wasn't human. She would never be human. But she had learned something human. She had learned to sacrifice. Arya, James finally managed. I don't know what to say. The android tilted her head. There is nothing to say, Captain. The decision is logical, even if my reasoning is not. Please prepare the repair equipment and brief me on the specific procedures required. She paused. And Captain, yes? Please do not inform Lieutenant Chen of the alternative scenario I presented. Based on my analysis of his psychological profile, he would likely attempt to prevent my sacrifice. This would create complications. James nodded slowly. I understand. Arya turned toward the door, then stopped. One more thing, Captain. What is it? When you see your brother, tell him something for me. James waited. Tell him that humans are illogical, but tell him also that I have come to believe this is not a flaw. It is what makes your species remarkable. And tell him that I am grateful. Grateful? For what? For the opportunity to observe, to learn, to understand, even partially, what it means to choose something more important than survival. She looked back at him one last time. I was created to serve, but today, I choose to serve. There is a difference. Goodbye, Captain Chen. She walked out of the bridge. James stood alone, tears running down his face. He had never thought he could mourn a machine. The repair took 2 hours and 47 minutes. James monitored Arya's progress from the bridge, watching her vital signs, her system status, her radiation exposure levels. He could hear her voice through the communication channel, calm and precise as always, reporting each step of the procedure. Phase 1 complete. Beginning Phase 2. Radiation exposure at 63% of critical threshold. Encountering unexpected damage to secondary coupling. Adjusting approach. Daniel stood beside him, having been woken from his sleep cycle by the commotion. He didn't know the full story. He just knew that Arya had volunteered for a dangerous repair. She's really doing it, Daniel said quietly. James nodded. Why? I mean, she's an android. She doesn't have to care whether we live or die. James thought about how to answer. Maybe she learned to care, he finally said. Daniel looked at him strangely. Androids can't learn emotions. They're programmed to simulate them, but they don't actually feel anything. James watched Arya's radiation levels climb higher. Maybe we don't know as much about androids as we think we do. The repair continued. Arya's voice never wavered, never showed any sign of distress, even as her systems began to degrade. Phase 2, complete. Beginning Phase 3. Radiation exposure at 89% of critical threshold. Experiencing minor system anomalies. Compensating. Motor function reduced by 12%. Adjusting movement parameters. James gripped the console. Arya, he said through the comm. How are you feeling? There was a pause. I do not feel, Captain. However, I am experiencing system degradation consistent with radiation exposure. My neural network is beginning to show corruption in non-essential sectors. She paused again. If you are asking whether I regret my decision, the answer is no. James closed his eyes. Thank you, Arya. You are welcome, Captain. The repair took another 40 minutes. During that time, Arya's system status deteriorated steadily. Her motor function dropped. Her processing speed slowed. Her voice, always so precise and measured, began to show small glitches. Phase 3 complete, she reported. Beginning of final phase. James leaned forward. Arya, Your systems are failing. Can you complete the repair? A long pause. I can complete the repair, Captain. I am experiencing difficulty with fine motor control. Estimated completion time has increased to 23 minutes. Another pause. Captain, I am detecting corruption in my primary memory banks. There is a possibility that I will lose coherence before completing the repair. James felt his heart clench. What can I do? Nothing, Captain. This is my task. I will complete it. She was silent for a moment. Captain, while I still have coherent processing capability, I would like to make a request. Anything. Please tell the colonists when they wake that they were saved by human illogic. James didn't understand. Arya explained, her voice glitching more frequently now. They will be told that an android performed the repair. They will think it was simple programming, simple logic, a machine doing what machines do. But it was not. It was a choice. A choice made because I observed humans choosing to sacrifice for each other. A choice made because I learned that some things are worth more than survival. She paused. I want them to know that their survival was not just a calculation. It was a gift, given freely. Given because I chose to give it. James nodded, even though she couldn't see him. I'll tell them, Arya. I promise. Thank you, Captain. The comm channel went silent except for the sound of Arya working. 23 minutes passed. Then Arya's voice came through one last time. Repair complete, Captain. Quantum drive should be fully functional. Recommend immediate departure from radiation zone. James let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. Arya, get back inside. We can try to repair your systems. A long pause. Negative, Captain. My motor function is now at 4%. I cannot move from my current position. Additionally, my neural network corruption has reached critical levels. Even if I returned, my core programming would not survive. Her voice was barely recognizable now, broken by static and glitches. It is time for me to cease function. James felt tears streaming down his face again. Arya, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Do not apologize, Captain. I made this choice. I do not regret it. Another pause. Longer this time. Captain, I have one final observation. I'm listening. I said that humans are illogical, that your emotional attachments compromise your decision-making, that your choices defy mathematical analysis. I was correct, but I was also wrong. Humans are illogical, but your illogic creates something beautiful. It creates love, sacrifice, meaning. It creates bonds that transcend mere survival. I am a machine. I was built to be logical, efficient, optimal. But in my final moments, I find that I do not want to be remembered as a machine that made an optimal choice. I want to be remembered as someone who learned to love. The comm channel crackled. Perhaps that is illogical, but I believe it is also true. Goodbye, Captain. Goodbye, Daniel. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you for teaching me what it means to choose. The channel went silent. James stood on the bridge, tears falling freely, staring at the damage display where Arya's status indicator had just gone dark. The silence was absolute. No one moved. No one spoke. Even the hum of the ship's system seemed to fade into nothing, as if the meridian itself was mourning. James had watched people die before. It was part of being a captain, part of leading humans into the dangerous void of space. But this was different. This was someone who shouldn't have been able to die at all, someone who shouldn't have been able to care enough to choose death. And yet she had. She had chosen them, chosen him, chosen his brother, chosen 2,000 sleeping colonists who would never know her name. Daniel put a hand on his shoulder. James, he said softly. What happened? What did she mean about learning to love? James wiped his eyes. She was going to die anyway, Daniel. The radiation, the repairs. She knew she wouldn't survive, but she didn't do it because she was programmed to. She did it because she chose to. Daniel looked confused. Chose to? She's an android. Androids don't choose. James turned to face his brother. She chose, Daniel. She watched us for 3 years. She watched humans sacrifice for each other. She watched us make choices that didn't make logical sense. And somewhere along the way, she started to understand why. He took a shaky breath. She died so you could live, so I could live, so everyone on this ship could live. And she did it because she wanted to. Daniel was silent for a long moment. Then he said quietly, she was more human than most humans I know. James nodded. Yeah, she was. The Meridian arrived at Kepler Station 3 days later. James filed his report. He recorded everything. Arya's sacrifice, her final words, her request that the colonists know the truth. The station administrators were skeptical at first. Androids didn't make choices. Androids didn't sacrifice themselves out of love. Androids were tools, sophisticated, but ultimately just machines. But James had the recordings. He had the logs. He had Arya's own words, preserved in the ship's memory banks. And when the colonists woke, when they learned what had happened, they didn't see Arya as a machine. They saw her as a hero. 3 months later, the colony was established on Kepler 442b. They named it New Arya. The naming ceremony had been unanimous. Not a single voice of dissent among the 2,000 colonists who had woken to learn that their lives had been saved by an android who chose to love them. James stood at the dedication ceremony, looking out at the first buildings of a new civilization. The structures were simple, prefabricated units arranged in neat rows, but to James, they looked like cathedrals. Every wall, every window, every door represented a future that almost hadn't happened, a future that existed because one artificial mind had learned the most human lesson of all. 2,000 people had made it. 2,000 people would build lives here, have children, create something that would last for generations. 2,000 stories that would unfold across years and decades and centuries, all tracing back to a single moment when a machine decided that logic wasn't enough. Daniel stood beside him, his arm around his older brother's shoulders. "You know," Daniel said, "I've been thinking about what she said, about humans being illogical." James nodded. "She was right, you know. We are illogical. We make choices that don't make mathematical sense. We sacrifice ourselves for people we love. We risk everything for things that can't be quantified." Daniel smiled. "But that's what makes us human." James looked at the sky, at the unfamiliar stars of a new world. Somewhere out there, floating in the radiation-soaked void, was what remained of Arya, her chassis, her neural network, everything that had made her who she was. But she wasn't really gone. She lived on in the colony that bore her name, in the children who would grow up hearing her story, in the lesson she had taught them all, that love is not logical, that sacrifice is not efficient, that the most important choices we make are often the ones that don't make sense. James pulled out a small data chip from his pocket. He had recovered it from Arya's memory banks before she died, a backup of her core personality. Incomplete but preserved. He didn't know if it could ever be restored. He didn't know if the technology existed to bring her back, but he would try, because that's what humans did. They hoped when hope was illogical. They tried when trying didn't make sense. They loved even when love cost them everything. And sometimes, just sometimes, that illogical stubbornness changed the universe. 5 years later, James Chen stood in a laboratory on New Arya. In front of him was a new chassis, identical to Arya's original form. Silver eyes, perfect synthetic skin, fluid, precise movements, and inside, a restored neural network built from that single data chip. The technicians had said it was impossible. The corruption was too extensive, the data too fragmented. But James had refused to accept that. He had worked for 5 years. He had assembled the best minds in the colony. He had pushed the boundaries of what anyone thought was possible, because Arya had given him his brother, and he would give her a second chance. The android's eyes flickered, then opened. She looked around the laboratory, processing her surroundings, analyzing the unfamiliar faces. Then her gaze settled on James. "Captain Chen," she said. Her voice was the same, precise, measured, exactly as he remembered. James smiled. "Hello, Arya." She tilted her head. "I have incomplete memories. My last coherent data suggests I was performing a repair on the Meridian's quantum drive. Did the repair succeed?" James nodded. "It succeeded. Everyone survived. Arya processed this." "That is optimal," she said. Then she paused. "I also have fragmented memory of a conversation. I believe I said something about learning to love." She looked at James. "Was I being illogical?" James laughed, tears in his eyes again. "Yes, Arya, you were being illogical." She considered this. "I see," she said. "And did my illogic prove to be problematic?" James shook his head. "No, it proved to be exactly what we needed." Arya was silent for a moment. Then she said something that made James's heart skip. "I am glad," she said. "I believe I would like to continue being illogical." She looked around at the laboratory, at the colony visible through the windows, at the future she had made possible. "It seems to produce positive outcomes." James reached out and took her hand. "Welcome back, Arya." She looked at their joined hands, processing this unfamiliar gesture. "Thank you, Captain," she said. "It is good to be back." And then, for the first time in her existence, Arya smiled. It was not programmed. It was not calculated. It was simply a choice, an illogical, beautiful, perfectly human choice. Thank you all for watching this story to the very end. If it moved you the way it moved me, please hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, the next time someone tells you that emotions are illogical, that love doesn't make sense, that sacrifice isn't rational, tell them about Arya. Tell them that sometimes the most logical thing you can do is choose to be illogical, because that's what makes us human. And maybe, just maybe, that's what makes us worth saving. Until next time.